That was me. Sorry. Good evening, everyone. Okay. So good evening and welcome to the virtual. There we go. Are we good? Good evening and welcome to the virtual Boise City Planning and Zoning public hearing. A few things to start out for the good of the order. Everyone from the public entering the hearing has automatically been muted and cannot speak. As the item you're interested in comes up for discussion, you'll be called upon and unmuted. We'll ask you if you have slides to share or if you can use the planner slides for your visual. If you have your own slides, your role will change to panelist. This may log you off for a moment and log you back in, and then you'll have the capabilities to share your screen. A quick overview for Zoom, as the capabilities and options are different depending on which device you're logging in with. If you're on a smartphone, you'll be limited to only speaking and sharing your camera. If you're on a computer, you can share your webcam if you have one, or your screen when called upon. Some laptops might not have a microphone capability. If you wish to speak over the phone but watch on your computer, the phone number for the hearing tonight will be listed in the chat or is listed on the email when you registered for tonight's hearing. For both smartphone and computer participation, there are controls on the bottom of Zoom to virtually raise your hand when you wish to speak on the item you're interested in. If you wish to attend on the phone with no visual capabilities, you can raise your hand virtually by typing in *9. Again, that's *9 to raise your hand virtually on the phone. There is a chat function in Zoom. It's not part of the record and should only be used if technical difficulties arise. If the chat function isn't available for you, you can email zoninginfo@cityofboise.org. Our procedures for public hearings begin with a presentation from the planning team, then we'll go to the applicant and then the representative of the Registered Neighborhood Association, followed by the questions from the commission. After that, we proceed to public testimony, starting with those who signed up on the electronic sign-up sheet on the website in advance, and then anyone who else raises their hand virtually. Each member of the public is allowed up to 3 minutes for testimony. We will provide a time at that 3 minutes. We'll let you wrap up and then you'll need to be done. We are strict with this time as it is limited in code. And then the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal, after which the hearing will be closed and the commission will deliberate and render a decision. Chair, you have the floor.
Good evening. We are citizen volunteers appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. We make final decisions on conditional use permits, variances and appeals, and recommendations to the city council on subdivisions, rezones, annexations, and code or comprehensive plan updates. Any decision made tonight may be appealed to the city council, provided that the appeal is filed within 10 days of the hearing. In order to file an appeal, you must have given written or oral testimony at tonight's meeting. So that's why it's important to give your name and address when you testify tonight. We utilize a consent agenda. This means that if the applicant agrees with the staff report, and if there is no public opposition, the item will be placed on the consent agenda. All items that are placed on the consent agenda are approved with one motion without further public comment. For items not on the consent agenda, we will hold a full public hearing in the order just detailed a few minutes ago with staff, applicant, neighborhood association, and then the public testimony. Thank you all for virtually attending tonight. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Stead, Schaefer,
Here.
Squires, Blanchard,
Here.
Moore,
Here.
Stevens,
Here.
Gillespie,
Here.
Finfrock,
Here.
Bratnober,
Here.
7 present, 2 absent.
Okay, we'll start with the consent agenda this evening. Without objection, I'd like to place the meeting minutes from May 6th and May 20th on the consent agenda. And then moving on to new business, we have several items this evening that I think are eligible for the consent agenda. We'll start with item A, that's SUB 19-75, Mooseland Estates subdivision. at 3976 North Cloverdale Road. Is the applicant present, either in person or online? Okay, we have an applicant, looks like Dean Briggs. I have a hand up. Do you give permission for him to? Okay. Is the applicant familiar with the terms and conditions in the staff report and in agreement with that report?
Yes, we are.
Terrific. And is there anyone either in person or online that's here to testify in opposition? I see no hands up. So with that, we'll place item A on the consent agenda. The next item on our agenda this evening is item number 1. That's CVA 20-20 at 1019 West Thatcher Street. That's a variance to encroach into the rear setback for an accessory structure on 0.24 acres in an R2 HD zone. Is the applicant present? I believe the applicant's online. I see a hand up. Mr. Hurd, are you in agreement with the terms and condition of the staff report? You might be muted. I see a hand up still.
Mr. Chair, the applicant is typing in chat saying, yes, we are.
Okay, thank you. I didn't have my chat window open. I apologize. And is there anyone in attendance that's would like to testify in opposition to this application this evening? I see no one in person or online with a hand up, so we will place item 1 on the consent agenda. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, I believe Commissioner Moore was trying to speak, but he might be muted.
There we go. Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Moore.
I would like to hear item number 1, CBA 20-0020, variance for 1019 West Thatcher Street.
Okay, thank you. We will hear item number 1. Okay, moving on to item number 2. That's PUD 20-20, Cook Brothers Construction at 5716 North Pierce Park Lane. That's a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 6 detached single-family homes on 0.76 acres in an R1C zone. Along with that, we have SUB 20-18, which is a preliminary and final plat at the same address. Is the applicant present this evening? I see a hand up. And is the applicant in agreement with the terms and condition of the staff report as written?
Yes.
The applicant is in agreement. And is there anyone here this evening that would like to testify in opposition to this project? I see no hands up and no one in person. And then is there any commissioners that would like to discuss this item?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Brattenober.
Yes, I would like to have a discussion on PUD 20-20 and SUB 20-18, please.
Okay, very good. We will hear item number 2. Moving on to item number 3, that's CUP 20-20, Craft Brewers of Boise at 420 North Orchard Street. It's a modification of a previously approved conditional use permit to expand a brew pub and patio space within 300 feet of a residential property on 0.92 acres in a C2D zone. Is the applicant present this evening? I see a hand up. And is the applicant in agreement with the terms and condition of the staff report?
Yes, we are.
Very good. And is there anyone present this evening that would like to speak in opposition to this project? I see no hands up and no one present. And are there any commissioners that would like to hear this item this evening? Very good. We will place item 3 on the consent agenda. Moving on to item number 4, PUD 20-19, Huron Properties LLC at 6016 North Pierce Park Lane. That's a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 10 detached single-family homes on 2.86 acres in an R1B zone. Along with that application, we have SUB 20-16, a preliminary plat at the same address, 60-6016 North Pierce Park Lane. Is the applicant present this evening?
Yes.
And is the applicant in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report as written?
Yes.
Very good. And is there anyone in attendance this evening that would like to speak in opposition to this project? Seeing none. And are there any commissioners that would like to review this item?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Bratnober.
Yes, I would like to have the discussion on PUD 20-19 and SUB 20-16, please.
Very good. We will hear those items.
Thank you.
And then I believe that would be all of the projects that we had as possibilities for the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would like to move that we approve the minutes from, I forgot the date on that. Can you tell me the date, please, of the minutes?
I believe those were May 6th and May 20th of this year.
Approve those meeting minutes as well as item A, SUB 19-75, item 3, CUP 20-20. And I believe that is all that were listed.
Thank you, Commissioner Bratnober.
Yes.
There's also item number A.
Oh, excuse me.
Oh, thank you. I thought I said that. Yes, item A, SUB 19-75.
Very good. So we have a motion to approve the minutes, items A and 3 on the consent agenda. Do I have a second? I have a second. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schaefer,
Yes.
Blanchard,
Yes.
Moore,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock.
Aye.
Bratnober. I believe that was an aye. All in favor, motion carries.
All right. Thank you, staff. All right. We'll move right into item number 1 this evening, CVA 20-20. That's Gravitas at 1019 West Thatcher Street. And I believe Ms. Nelson is here this evening for that one.
Chair, Commissioners, give me a moment while I share my screen with you. Before you is a variance request to encroach into the rear setback for an accessory structure in a medium-density residential with a historic design review overlay zone. The property is located in the north end on the southeast corner of 11th and Thatcher Street. The surrounding area is primarily residential, comprised of detached single-family homes, duplexes, and diverse multifamily options. The applicant proposes to demolish the existing garage on site in order to construct a larger two-car garage with a second-story accessory dwelling unit. The new structure will be placed 5 feet from the rear property line when a 15-foot rear setback is required by code. There are exceptional circumstances justifying the variance. The new garage and ADU will not encroach into the rear setback any further than the existing garage, previously encroached for nearly 100 years. Furthermore, the encroachment into the rear yard for the proposed garage and ADU will allow for the retention of a mature 30-inch caliper shade tree, along with other established landscaping on site. The planning team cannot identify any adverse impacts on surrounding properties. There will be no windows facing the property to the south, which would be most impacted by the variance. This proposal will bring the single-family home into compliance with parking and will provide parking off the alley as is encouraged by Boise City Code and the comprehensive plan. The proposal received a historic certificate of appropriateness, and the planning team is unaware of any opposition. One letter of support has been received. The proposal is consistent with Boise City Code and meets the approval criteria for a variance. As such, the planning team recommends approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carla. Next, we'll hear from the applicant.
Am I on? Can you hear me?
We can.
Great, great. Yeah, I think that was summed up really well. And yeah, we're looking at the tree that provides a lot of shade. It's quite a large tree. It's 60 or 70 feet tall, as well as locating the garage and ADU where the existing, for the most part, where the existing garage is. It's kind of right now in no man's land between that neighbor's garage, which is to the south, and the existing garage, and then in the future, the proposed garage. So because of the closeness of the neighbor's garage, it just felt like that we could use the space of the existing open space to the north a lot more productively than we would be able to the south of the garage. So the existing tree is important, existing landscape. It's kind of like, it's a very large lot, so it's kind of like a park-like setting, and we wanted to preserve that atmosphere as much as possible for the benefit of Thatcher Street, as well as the preserve the landscaping that's there. We did meet with the neighbor on site that is to the south, and they had no objections. They were supportive of the application, as well as Historic Preservation Commission, who approved the addition and the ADU with the garage unanimously. And as staff mentioned, we do not have windows on that side of the ADU to preserve the privacy of the neighbor to the south. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Just real quick, can we get your name and address for the record?
Yes, sorry. Derek Hurd, and it's 112 East 33rd Street in Garden City.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hurd. We're going to move on to, before questions, move on to any representative from the neighborhood association if they're in attendance this evening. Okay, I see no hands raised and no one is live and in person here. So with that, I think we'll move right on into questions from the commission.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry. Commissioner Moore.
So my main question, I guess, is it's kind of hard to tell on that Google Earth image. Are those, the properties to the south, it looks like those are handled kind of like a side yard setback, that shared property line right there. Is that correct?
Commissioner Moore, would you like staff to handle that question?
Staff, yes, please.
Chair, Commissioner Moore, yes, it acts mostly like a side yard setback. That the property to the south has 2 street sides, and the one closest to this accessory structure, which is seeking the variance, is a side yard.
That's just one, I'm just sorry, follow-up question. Is that just one property to the south there?
Chair, Commissioner Moore, that is correct. That's one property.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the commission for either the applicant or staff? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on into the public hearing. Is there anyone in the public that would like to testify regarding this project this evening? I see no hands raised. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion. Veronica raised her hand. Oh, I'm sorry. Do I have a hand up? We do. I have a Veronica with a hand up.
Can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Give me just one moment. Okay, I do have a testimony.
If you would, please, your name and address for the record.
Absolutely. Give me 1 second. It is Veronica Wallace. The address is 3649 East Santa Clara Drive. I'm in Santan Valley, Arizona, 85140. I am actually speaking on behalf of Jennifer Blazer. She is currently seeking some medical care right now, and she is the one who has orchestrated the testimony that I am about to give on her behalf. Give me just 1 second. So this is regarding 4800 Hill Road. In whom it may concern, I am writing to request the application to
I'm sorry, ma'am.
subdivide.
Veronica,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I think you're actually getting a bit ahead of us. That item is not until item number 5 this evening.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll put you down as wanting to testify on item number 5. Okay, is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify in regards to item number 1, which is CVA 20-20 at 1019 West Thatcher Street? Okay, no hands up at this time. So with that, we will return back to the applicant. Mr. Hurd, do you have any other rebuttal that you'd like to provide this evening?
I don't have anything else.
Very good. With that, we will return back to the commission. And what's the commission's pleasure?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Stevens.
move to approve item number 1, CVA 20-20 at 1019 West Thatcher Street with all the terms and conditions of the staff report.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Stevens and a second by Commissioner Brattenober. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry. We got ahead of ourselves. Discussion.
Since I requested it, I just want to say that I requested it because the proposed variance was for a 2-story ADU versus the single-story garage, and just making sure that it's handled like a side street or a side yard, interior side yard setback, which would be 5 feet, and that's the proposed setback for this variance on the garage. Making sure that it's equal on the other side and that there's no inequality. After seeing that the addition setback 15 feet, it kind of calls into question with the 2 foot. But at this time, I feel perfectly comfortable knowing that property across that shared property line is handling their setbacks in a similar way in that interior side setback. So I would like to support this as well. Thank Mr. Hurd and our staff for presenting it as well.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we will move on to the vote. I have a motion and a motion by Commissioner Stevens and a second by Commissioner Bratnober. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schaefer,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Bratnober.
Aye. Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. All right, we'll move right on into item number 2, PUD 20-20, Cook Brothers Construction, and SUB 20-18. Those are conditional use permits and preliminary and final plats at 5716 North Pierce Park Lane. And with that, we'll hear from Ms. Nelson again.
Chair, Commissioners, before you is a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 6 detached single-family homes in an R1C zoning district. Also included are preliminary and final plats comprised of 1 common and 6 buildable lots. The property is on the east side of Pierce Park Lane, south of Hill Road. A 9-hole golf course is to the east, and an ACHD drainage lot is directly to the north. Here's a site plan and landscape plan. The development is under 1 acre in size, removing the requirement for amenities. However, each single-family home will have private rear yards exceeding the 100 square foot of open space requirement. Common open space will also be provided along the Spoil Banks Canal. The applicant is requesting waivers to the subdivision ordinance for a private street width of 27 feet with sidewalk on one side rather than a width of 28 feet with sidewalk on both sides as required by code. The planning team is supportive of these requests as they are interior to the development, and due to the narrowness of the lot, waivers are necessary to allow for adequate building envelopes. To allow for future connectivity opportunities, a condition of approval will require that a note and depiction be added to the subdivision plat for a blanket public access easement that would go through the extent of the common lot, including the private street and irrigation easement along the Spoil Banks Canal. Depending on approval by Irrigation District Number 2, the public access easement could end at the edge of the irrigation easement. In conclusion, all commenting agencies have approved the project with standard conditions, and the planning team is recommending approval of the application. Just as a reminder, the commission will make a final decision on the plan unit development and a recommendation to City Council on the subdivision. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carla. Now we'll move on and hear from the applicant.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Ben Semple, 1014 South LaPointe Street, Suite 3, Boise, Idaho, 83706. I want to thank Ms. Nelson for her presentation. And as I stated earlier, we are in agreement with all of the conditions of approval, including the extension of a cross-access easement through the fire department turnaround to the property to the south, and to cover a public access easement over, if allowed by the irrigation district, over the portion of the irrigation easement. We do intend on putting some new landscaping as is shown on the site and landscape plan that's on the screen right now as well. We did request the waiver of the sidewalk on the north side of the private street, mostly so that we could provide a better landscape buffer between the ACHD drainage pond that's to the north and the private street. The private street, also being 27 feet wide, will allow for on-street parking on one side, which we intend to put along that north side. It will accommodate 8 standard spots and 4 compact spaces. So we would have 2 guest parking spaces associated for each lot, along with each house will have a 2-car garage. One of the reasons that we are requesting that PUD for the reduced lot sizes. In this area, there's a lot of larger single-family homes. There are some infill developments that are occurring specifically to the south on Pierce Park and on the west side. And this is kind of in keeping with that type of development, also to provide a more affordable option for people that want to live in closer to town, in a smaller home. The setbacks that we have on the rear setbacks, which would be the south property line, we are maintaining the R1C setback of 15 feet. So each home will have a 540 square foot private yard associated with them. And then we feel that the proximity to foothills trails, as well as the golf course. I know that there's some talks about a future canal pathway along the Farmers Union Canal, which is on the other side of Pierce Park Greens. Provides for a lot of opportunity for future residents. And we are also going to be proposing at least the ability to provide for EV charging in the garages of these homes as well, just as another amenity for future residents. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Before we move to questions, we'll see if there's a representative from the Neighborhood Association in attendance this evening. I see no hands up online. With that, we'll return this to the commission for any questions to either staff or the applicant.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Bratnober.
Hi, yes. I have one question for the applicant. You'd mentioned, I'm not sure I understood the justification you listed for the smaller lot sizes. I got a little confused on that. Could you give me that again, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Bratnober, the property size does allow for up to 6 units based on the code of 8 units an acre at 0.76 acres. And in order to provide for a little bit larger yard, as well as to accommodate the irrigation easement and the 20-foot landscape buffer along the front, we were looking at doing some smaller homes. I'm not going to call them tiny homes because they're not, I don't think fit in that classification. But we feel like this is appropriate to provide an option for maybe some more affordability within this area of town. There's a lot of larger lot single family residential here. And we felt bringing in a smaller single family home rather than trying to do something that was attached like townhomes or something like that was more appropriate for this location. And the smaller lots do allow for us to get the 6 units while still providing for more private open space than what would be required for a PUD. And then we also have the common area in the back that would encompass that irrigation easement that we do intend to landscape. And again, assuming that we can get irrigation district approval for putting some other improvements back in there, maybe like a little picnic area and some stuff where it's a really nice space along that canal back there. There's some large mature trees. And so the smaller lot size kind of helps us maintain that as well.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm understanding you, the lot sizes are more or less in contrast to what you have surrounding it. Is that a fair statement?
They're definitely smaller than most of the lots around here, yes.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bratnober.
I have a question for staff, please. So obviously this is significantly, although the density is right for R1C, the dimensions of the lots are not by a big amount. Was there any idea about looking at alternatives? I don't know if there's a zoning designation that would fit these lots, but what other alternatives were pursued, please?
Chair, Commissioner Brattenober, the planning and development process does allow for reduced lot sizes within the density of the zone. So we reviewed the application based on the planning and development standards and found that it was compliant.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sorry, was that Ben?
Yes. Commissioner Brattenober, we did look at how we could accommodate or bring the lots to within conformance within a zoning district, but typically we're not allowed to do spot zoning. I think a R1M is maybe a zone that would allow for these lot sizes, but having a spot zone to R1M would also increase the ability to put a higher density on this property, which we didn't feel was appropriate. And while these homes and lots are smaller, with a 5,000 square foot minimum lot size in R1C, I know these are about half that size, but we did feel that by providing a smaller single family residence on a smaller lot that still has a pretty decent sized backyard, that it was in better conformance with the surrounding neighborhoods, because they are detached single family. And that's kind of why, and without being able to rezone to something else, we felt that this was appropriate based on the parcel shape and that as well, if that helps you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gillespie.
Question for Carla. So Carla, I'm looking at this little teeny tiny map with my bad eyes, and it doesn't look like there are any existing single family lots or homes or anywhere around this. Is that correct?
Chair, Commissioner Gillespie, there are some large
No, I mean directly adjacent.
Directly adjacent. There is a large residential lot directly to the south, although it's quite large, and I think there's probably a chance that it could redevelop. To the north is an ACHD drainage lot.
Right. Okay. Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner.
So Carla, I'm also looking at the homes on Hammer Mill and Fenwick and then up on Barron, sort of all, these are probably within less than a quarter mile. Those look like pretty skinny lots to me, some of them. Do you happen to know if those are also smaller than the R1C size?
Chair, Commissioner Gillespie, yes, especially the ones on Hammer Mill Drive. The full development there would still be larger average lot sizes than what's proposed, but there's quite a few more lots, and some of them are similar in size to what is being proposed here.
Thank you.
Mr.
Any
Chair.
other questions for staff?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Stevens.
I also have a question for Carla. So I didn't see anything in the staff report related to some of the comp plan goals with regard to providing variety of housing, specifically in some of our neighborhoods. Aha, maybe it was there. I looked and maybe, and I just was wondering, I think that in terms of affordability, and I don't think that it is represented in this chart that's in front of us. Is there anything in our comp plan regarding not just the form and the size of the lots in terms of diversity, but also in terms of affordability in some of these established neighborhoods that might help us with this particular application?
Chair, Commissioner Stevens, yes, the comprehensive plan would certainly, I think, encourage us to look at a variety of housing options, including affordable. This application wasn't presented to us as necessarily being affordable housing, but it is, I think, providing a different arrangement of single-family housing in a neighborhood that is primarily single-family housing.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Ben, yes.
Just to add a little bit more, if I can share my screen, or I guess if you can look on yours too, if you're looking at Google Earth, to the south on Pierce Park on the east side, off of You can't see it there. Here, I'll show my screen if I can. Oh, you're sharing yours though. Okay. So the subject property for this project is here. And then if you go to, this is Foggy Bottom right here. And these homes, this lot size right here I checked is 2,600 square feet. So this is very similar in terms of lot size, although these appear to have a reduced rear setback, which we would be providing for a larger rear setback. But again, kind of similar where it's got a turnaround and lot sizes that are comparable. So that would be kind of something that is very similar within close proximity to this one.
Okay, thank you for that, Ben. Are there any other questions for staff or the applicant from the commission?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Blanchard.
thank you. I have a question for staff as well. Carla, I'm sorry if this is pedantic, but can you explain to me the rationale for 3-foot interior setbacks?
Chair, Commissioner, that is what the applicant requested. So perhaps they could explain better why they needed that much. By building code, we want 3 feet unless they were attached townhomes.
Okay, let me interject before Mr. Semple comes back on then, because here's where I'm looking at this from is we wouldn't approve a structure like this even in R2 where we want density with 3-foot side setbacks. So it's kind of perplexing to me why we would put really this many units way out there on State Street with 3-foot side setbacks, where all around Boise State, where you've got R2 properties, we would never consider something with 3-foot setbacks. We would, as you know, if we're going to have a 2-story structure, the upper floors would have to be set back to even get a 5-foot setback, if I'm reading code correctly. So I'm just kind of perplexed where we don't need density out there along State Street. And I'm kind of, these buildings are 2,000 square feet. I don't consider that to be a small footprint, or when it's priced out, these are going to be probably pushing $400,000 a piece, and that's above median, unless I'm wrong, Ben. But that's kind of my concern, is that we wouldn't approve anything like this in a zone like R2 even, and we're looking at doing it in a residential zone.
Chair, Commissioner Blanchard, we do allow for reduced interior setbacks through the plan unit development process, and we certainly do allow for that in R2 or all of the R zones with this process that we're looking at today. So the plan unit development in combination with subdivision allows for reduced interior setbacks and reduced lot sizes as are being proposed, and it has certainly been approved elsewhere in the city.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Semple, yes.
Commissioner Blanchard, to touch on that a little bit more, just to clarify, the lots themselves are about 2,300 square feet, but the buildable area is under 2,000 substantially. It's probably closer to about 1,700 square foot of footprint, and it's definitely not just a box that gets built in here. I did submit some floor plans on those two. Those are still going through development. And the 3-foot interior side setback, as Carla had stated, is approvable through the planned unit development. And we felt that because we're not adjacent to any single story or other structures that would limit our height, that it was appropriate in this area, because I do believe that the properties to the south of this are going to redevelop as well into something that's a little bit closer to something like this, or that is already going on within very close proximity to this as well. It also allowed us to get a little bit larger of a home on the lot for the future residents there too.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Stevens?
I guess I'll ask the applicant a follow-up question, and that is, if I read the floor plans correctly, these are how many bedrooms? I thought I only saw two, at least on one of the floor plans. Is that right? So we're talking about a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Stevens, that's correct. They're 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom.
And I guess just to be clear for the record, I did recognize this wasn't necessarily legally defined affordable housing, but my assumption was with a smaller house like that in a neighborhood like this, that they would be going for smaller amounts of money. So that was my theory on that one. Who knows in this market, but.
That's the thought. Yes.
Okay, thank you all. Any other final questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, with that, we will move into the public testimony on this project. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify in regards to this project? We have very few people online this evening, and I see no hands up. And we also have a very small audience live and in person. So I'm going to assume there is no public comment on this project. With that, Ben, we can return it back to you for rebuttal if you have any other final comments.
Mr. Chairman, I do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will return this back to the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Stevens.
I'll move that we approve PUD 20-20 and SUB 20-18.
Second.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Stevens.
Sorry.
Good.
I totally jumped the gun. Sorry.
I have a motion. Do we have a motion as well on the SUB 20?
She did both.
You did both? Did you?
Yep.
Okay, I apologize. Commissioner Stevens. Discussion.
Sorry. And if I'm swatting, it's because I'm outdoors and there's like flies and mosquitoes and stuff. So apologies for all my gesticulation. I actually am really pleased to see an application like this. It strikes a good balance in my mind between having some density, but having single family homes as opposed to multifamily every time we see a building envelope that looks like this or a parcel that looks like this, forgive me. And I actually do think it's a good spot for some density. And I know it's marked as stable, and I think that this actually continues the neighborhood's ability to remain stable and to continue to sustain that marking. So I think it's a good project, and I think that the waivers that are requested are justified, particularly because I think that the open space along the canal and the backyards are a really nice provide a really nice balance for the small homes. So I'm in full support of the application.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Bratnober.
Yes, so probably no surprise. I have some concerns about the lot dimensions for this application. Obviously, the density matches the R1C designation, but the dimensions are in some cases half of what the zoning specifies. So, you know, as a commission, we have latitude to exercise leeway on these specifications. In most cases, the deviation is nowhere near this large, but it allows us to address the critical housing shortages in Boise, which are, you know, quite significant. I looked at alternate zoning possibilities and couldn't find any. To Mr. Semple's statement, R1M is the closest, but I think the reduced size that would fit requires that the housing is attached, if I'm reading the code correctly, which this is not. And seems to be we've got a couple of choices here. Reduce the number of lots to configure, you know, and configure it closer to the R1C specs, or just approve and move on. I think the fact that this is, by Mr. Semple's description, done in some contrast or what have you, versus the other larger lots around, that causes me a bit of a concern as well, because it's not meshing. So I'm concerned if we just approve and move on, because this can easily become a habit. And as such, we'd be setting a precedent that can potentially erode zoning requirements. Not, you know, not trying to single this one out, although that's kind of where we are. When we have this kind of discrepancy, we should pause and think towards the future. If we truly need these kinds of lot sizes and this kind of zoning, we should be modifying the law appropriately, or rezone to the correct specs, or reconfigure. It may mean that we need to add a zone or two. Fine. I think the law needs to keep up with the pressing demand of a growing city. If we continue to approve lots which are much smaller than required in the desired zones, we're risking both our credibility as a commission and eroding citizens' confidence in the law. So those are my concerns about falling into this repetitive nature of approving lot sizes which are dramatically lower. We've seen in commission meetings, neighbors come up in arms about the smaller lot size. You know, we had a parade of them last month. So I'd like us to consider very carefully, and let's look at what the law needs to be instead of being forced into working around it so much. I hope that's clear. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it's Commissioner Finfrock. I agree with Commissioner Brattenover on that. I'm not comfortable deviating from the dimensional standards that the subdivision ordinance requires. If we are getting to the extent that we have on this application, I think we should just rezone, or at least see if it meets the standards for the rezone. I agree with him. There has to be a standard, and we just get further and further away from it, and I'm uncomfortable as well.
If you wouldn't mind, Commissioner Finfrock, maybe just repeating the last couple of statements there. You were a little quiet.
Sorry about that. Is this better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I was just saying that I'm uncomfortable deviating from the dimensional standard that the subdivision ordinance requires. And I think Commissioner Brattenover said it pretty well, but if we deviate to this extent, I think we should just be looking at a rezone.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
So I'll be supporting the motion to approve. I think the basic issue here is it's a long, skinny lot, and we have to put a street in because of the orientation of the lot. So you have to put in a 27-foot wide street, and then we've got a very large irrigation easement. And so in order to get to the density allowed by the zone, we have to have these skinny lots. I'd also point out that it's no specific case of adverse impact has been shown. No one has objected to this proposal. The lot to the north is a ACHD yard. The lot to the east is a golf course and a canal. So they're never going to come into any sort of conflict or adversity. And the lot to the south is a single family home now. But I think the applicant is correct. It's likely to redevelop in kind of a similar pattern with multiple houses or multiple lots on that southern lot line. So I just don't see where the sort of adverse impact is. And I think there's a clear interest here to build these houses in the way that the applicant has proposed. And we got to put a street in there or we'll never develop that lot. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Moore.
Yes, I'm in support of this motion, but I just would like to say that it seems like there's two kind of competing ideas going, or two competing points in the zoning code going on, where we either prioritize density or the density allowed in a zone, or we prioritize the size of the lots. And so it seems to me if we do want to prioritize the density, like Commissioner Brattenover said, maybe we do need to do something about those minimum lot sizes. And if we're going to focus on that density, I mean, that is absolutely something that we might want, that we need to look at and really think about maybe it's just not right for the code anymore, or maybe it needs to be changed or revised somehow to fit the blueprint Boise better. I will note that
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I will note that all the adjacent setbacks to the adjacent properties, those all meet the zone, or dimensionally meet the zone. So interior, it would be a variance from that or different from the zone, but to your adjacent properties, it does meet the zone and would be the same as if you had just one. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Gillespie again.
So,
Mr. Chair,
1 minute. Is that Commissioner Stevens? Hang on 1 second. I think Mr. Gillespie is going to have some more comments here.
so just a procedural point. So the whole reason this is before us as a PUD is to deal with the lot sizes and the setbacks. So we do have a process in the code for essentially adjudicating and resolving the issues that some of the other commissioners are concerned about. That's what the PUD findings do, is allow us to make these decisions with respect to lot size and setbacks. And that's normally in every one of these that we do, that's the criteria we should be applying. Thank you.
And Commissioner
Mr.
Stevens.
Chair. Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest here. I want to reiterate what Commissioner Gillespie just said, which is that we have a process, and this is what we're deploying, is the process that's in our code. And if we start having a zone that matches every single situation, we're going to have a zoning code that exceeds the hundreds of pages that already exist. So I think that we're going backwards here, guys. We have a situation where the PUD is the process. And we're dealing with the PUD. It happens to be under an acre. And so he doesn't have to, the applicant does not have to apply or provide amenities. Yet we have a situation where there's a large amount of open space being provided regardless. There was no discussion for the people, Commissioner Bratnober's comments had nothing to do that I could tell with compatibility, but instead merely a sort of wanting to make sure that it meets the absolute specific things of the code. And I'm going to disagree with Commissioner Bratnober also that we never deviate this much. It's not true. We do. And that's exactly what the PUD process is for. And we've done it many, many times in many different zones throughout the entire city. So I don't agree with the premise there. And I don't agree that we need to keep writing new zones that can fit every single piece of property that comes before us. We have a process. It's being deployed properly here. I think staff has come up with findings that make sense for it. And I stand by the motion, and I don't think we need to write a new zone for this kind of thing.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Bratnober.
Oh, so a couple of things. First of all, I'm not saying that we need to adhere specifically to the exact square footage. That was never my intent. It has to do more with the level of discrepancy. You're exactly right. Even in my brief time as a commissioner, we've approved some of these, and that's fine. The issue is when we get to this level of deviation. I'm not looking for us to do a zone for every single size, if you will. I think Commissioner Moore stated it very well. There is a question of trade-off here. It's matching, it's coming in right at the density allowed. However, the dimensions for the lots are way off. So which is most important? Do we strive to do both? Come within, I don't know, maybe 1,000 square feet of the dimension? You live with that. But we're 50%. Now, I fully expect that this is going to go ahead and be approved and all that stuff. But we're going to run into this over and over again. And what we saw in our last meeting was that this is a concern for the neighbors in cases. Now, in this case, you're right, Commissioner Gillespie, there was no objection. But I believe these things need to go on the record, because otherwise we're just, we've got this stuff coming through here and we're going to approve it. And neighborhood opposition maybe is not taken into account as much as it ought to when that comes up. So what I'd like to do is see us look at the law closer, and adapt to what we're seeing as a city in terms of growth and the need for affordable housing, which I'm not sure where this one comes in, because as you pointed out, Commissioner Stevens, this was not designated affordable housing or low-cost housing, I think. So, you know, I don't want to be overly persnickety about this. And I do believe in the PUD process, and I believe this objection is part of working through that process. And so be it.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other final comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve PUD 2020 and recommend for approval SUB 20-18. Will the clerk please call the vote?
Schaefer,
Aye.
Blanchard,
No.
Moore,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock,
No.
Bratnober,
Nay.
4 in favor, 3 opposed, motion carries.
Okay, thank you all for that. Okay, we'll move on to our next item, which I believe is item number 4, PUD 20-19 and SUB 20-16 at 6016 North Pierce Park Lane. And we'll hear from Mr. Kevin Holmes.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, let me just share my screen here. All right, before you use a conditional use permit for a planned residential development comprised of 10 detached single-family homes on 2.86 acres located at 6016 and 6100 North Pierce Park Lane in an R1B zone. Also included is a preliminary plat for a residential subdivision comprised of 10 buildable lots and 5 common lots. Property is located on the west side of Pierce Park, just south of Hill Road. Surrounding properties are all single-family homes, either zoned R1C or R1B. Access is taken from a private street out to Pierce Park with 2 shared driveways providing direct access to 9 out of the 10 homes. With the PUD, the applicant is requesting reduced internal side and rear setbacks, as well as reductions to the minimum lot sizes and widths. The planning team is supportive of those modifications as they will have minimal impacts to neighboring properties. The property is a unique shape, and the density of 3.49 dwelling units per acre remains well below the 4.8 allowed in the R1B zone. Building heights, parking requirements, and perimeter setbacks will all meet the requirements of the zone. On-site amenities include landscaped common lots with picnic areas, an easement preserving a future connection shown here in red to the future pathway along the Farmer Unions Canal to the northeast, and pre-wiring homes with the capacity for electric vehicle charging in the garages. So this last one is did come about through the PUD process, and it basically consists of having an outlet similar to what's used in a dryer in each of the garages. So this does allow the homeowner to easily plug in a level 2 electric vehicle charger without the added hassle and cost of rewiring the house. Planning team is fully supportive of this as it does lower barriers to EV adoption and helps the city move towards accomplishing some of its goals associated with the Boise's Energy Future initiative, as well as being supported by the comprehensive plan. So something like this does fall under the quote, other amenities as approved by the commission category and code. Commenting agencies have approved the proposal with standard conditions, and no letters of opposition have been received. The planning team is recommending approval of the application with conditions. For the PUD, the commission is the decision-making body. And for the subdivision, the commission is a recommending body to City Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. And now we'll hear from Mr. Semple again, I believe.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Ben Semple, 1014 South LaPointe Street, Suite 3, Boise, Idaho 83703. This will be the second of 3 that you hear from me tonight. This, again, as stated by Mr. Holmes, I appreciate his staff report. We are in agreement with all the conditions of approval contained in that staff report. So I guess the biggest things on here would be lot size. So our lot sizes are approximately 5,800 square feet. There is one that's closer to about 5,200 square feet, and that would be lot 12 as shown there. The surrounding areas to the south is Belmar number 1, which was approved, I believe, a couple of years ago. It's pretty much built out all the way, if not built out all the way. To the north is our three, or immediately adjacent to the north are 3 single-family homes with a private street to their north, and then 3 more homes to the north of them. To the east is Belmar, or is the Farmers Union Canal, and on the other side of the canal is Belmar subdivision number 2. To the west is Pierce Park and some existing single-family residential developments. With these, you can see on the image that's shown there, while the lot sizes are a little bit smaller, we are maintaining all exterior setbacks as required by the R1B zone. And then we're requesting essentially R1C setbacks on the interior with 5-foot side yard setbacks. We will maintain a 20-foot setback off of those common drives to the drive or to the garages. All homes will have at least a 2-car garage, with a couple of them having a 3-car garage, as well as then a driveway that would accommodate guests. The private street width of 28 feet from back to back does allow for parking on one side as well. So there would be ample on-street and in driveway guest parking opportunities. One thing I did want to mention as well is that the developer of this property intends to build their personal home on lot 11. That's the lot in the back there. So they do intend to live in this development. I worked very closely with them in developing this land plan. One of the reasons that we tried to, well, there's a few challenges on this site with some grade, that specifically on the southwest side of that, which is, again, we utilize the PUD process, which a straight subdivision of this size property in R1B would have allowed 13 units. We've gone down to 10, but reduced the lot width slightly in order to provide for some maintaining of that landscape in the southwest corner. There's some fairly large mature landscaping in there, as well as a kind of a start of a mound, or a kind of the ground slopes up there towards the east. So the homes on lots 2, 3, and 4, which would be the 3 along Pierce Park south of the private street, would be essentially daylight homes. You'd come in from the behind in the alley, the private driveway, drive into the garage, and then there would be a floor below that along the front. So your garage would be on the 2nd level, but from the east, it presents as a 1-story home. We will have a 20-foot landscape buffer along Pierce Park. That will be maintained by the HOA. And then we are working, during the neighborhood meeting, I had some conversations with the individuals immediately to the north about working with them during the landscape design of the individual homes to make sure that we're protecting their privacy as well. The 3 homes to the north of our private street, there's 3 homes to the north, but essentially only 2 of our homes, lot 7 and lot 9, would impact them directly. Again, we're maintaining that a minimum 10-foot setback, and we'll put some substantial landscape, some evergreens along that side to help with privacy for existing and future residents. To the south, between this property and Belmar number 1, there's an emergency access road that was put in as part of the Belmar approvals. So that provides for an additional buffer from those existing homes. And then these lot sizes, if you look at Belmar, the center of it, Kevin, if I can share my screen for a second. So these lots in the middle of Belmar number 1 approximate around 6,000 square feet up to 7,000 square feet. Some of them, obviously there's some larger ones around the perimeter. This creates kind of a transition. We would have the large lot. The large lot here in the back takes up the majority of this portion right here. And so the impact of one home on these 5, and then looking at these 2 homes along here, along the southern boundary. Well, here's that landscape area, the buffer, that's kind of the open space, one of the open spaces. Those 2 lots fall right here. There's currently 2 existing single family homes on the site as well. This doesn't show the build out here, but these 2 homes are finished as well along there. So there's 3 here where we'll just have 2 along the bottom portion of it. I think by utilizing the PUD, it allows us to not only maintain that landscape area here to the south, some very mature landscaping, but also accommodate. We're not filling up these lots all the way. Obviously, there's a lot of outdoor usable space, private and public for these. Again, with proximity to foothills, trails. If you go up Pierce Park, it's very close to Hill Road, and obviously everyone knows about the opportunities for recreation in the foothills around here. We feel very good about the project. We intend on providing kind of a modern farmhouse design on these homes. I think it'll fit really well with the existing homes in the area. Again, we did address some concerns about kind of lot or home heights and then impact on neighbors. I think that we came to a pretty good design where we reduced our lot count and are providing for a very nice project in this area that will fit in very well. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Ben. First, we'll move on to representatives from the Neighborhood Association, if there are any in attendance. And I assume that there are not, because our last application was in the same neighborhood. So with that, we will move on to questions from the commission for either staff or the applicant.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Bratnober?
Yes, question for staff. As noted, the lot sizes are probably about 60% smaller than the zoning requires. And I see that there is R1C across the street as well as down by Barron Lane. Can you advise why R1B? I realize that the existing zoning is R1B, but why, given how the development looks, we're not using R1C there or recommending a rezone to R1C, please?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bratnober, similar to the last project, the PUD process does allow for requested reductions of those interior setbacks that maybe would be more in line with some of the R1C dimensional standards. But as we are looking at a density that still does fit within the R1B, it does follow the procedural setup that is in place with the PUD process and those findings as were outlined in the staff report.
So again, we're into that prior, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Bratnober.
So again, it sounds like we're into that, I guess, as Commissioner Moore stated, at that prioritization of density versus dimension. Is that a fair statement?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bratnober, that certainly is one way to look at this, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Semple.
If I could add a little bit, Commissioner Bratnober, one of the reasons that we felt it was appropriate to stay at R1B in this zone is it is R1B to the south as well as to the north of this. And if we tried to rezone to R1C where that does exist to the west and further to the south off of Barron Lane, that would allow for the development of up to 22 units on this property, which we probably could fit 17 or 18 of on here with, you know, a little bit more creative design, especially not having that large, essentially a half-acre plus lot on the back for the developer, which we definitely did not feel fit this area. You know, with almost 3 acres of property or 2.86 acres with 10 units on it, we felt was very appropriate for this zone, and keeping an R1B would protect for if someone in the future was to come along, they could rezone it or go through a rezone. But for us to do that now didn't feel like the path we wanted to go down, to open the door for someone to come in and buy the project before it was fully built out, or to come back and revise it to put almost double the units on here. And in talking with the neighbors, we felt like this was much more appropriate way to handle the redevelopment of this.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Any other questions for staff or the applicant? Okay, very good. We will move.
I'm sorry, I was on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Bratnover.
So thank you, Mr. Semple. I appreciate your explanation there. That's helpful. As I look down around Barron Lane, I look at the size of those lots. Now, obviously, I don't have the measurements, but those are pretty substantial lots, probably would fit R1B. Yet, for some reason, back in history, we don't know why they chose to zone that at R1C. And so that's why it's piqued my curiosity here. When you compare what you're seeing there in terms of lot sizes, surrounding housing, and the existing zoning. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions from the commission? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and open up the public testimony for the project. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify regarding this project? This audience. He's coming. Well, we have no takers live and in person, and I see no takers online either. Okay, so with that, we'll close the public hearing portion of this project, and then return back to Mr. Semple. Ben, any other final comments for rebuttal?
Mr. Chairman, none at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. With that, we will return this item back to the commission.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Gillespie.
move that we approve PUD 20-19 and recommend approval for SUB 20-16 with all the terms and conditions in the staff report.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, a motion by Commissioner Gillespie and a second by Commissioner Moore. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
So similar to the last one, we used the PUD process here, I think very wisely, to get the right number of units in a very difficult parcel. Again, we have to put in a private street. It doesn't have great connectivity. We see here, and we've seen and will see in the next application, the results of many, many years of planning in Ada County and the lack of coherent street grids, which makes this necessary to do it the way we're doing it. And it's hard. In this particular case also, I think the layout of the homes is such that there's really minimal impact on all the surrounding homes. And in fact, it fits kind of quite nicely, I think, both north and south and to the sort of the, across the canal and to the east. So I'm, again, strongly supportive of this application. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Moore?
I support this motion because if you look at the density, I mean, if it's right between an R1B and an R1C zone, it's under the R1B density even. And you know, you're not pushing the density on any of that surrounding your setbacks all the way around. Your perimeter setbacks conform to the zone that it's in. And all your variant deviations from some of those lot sizes are all interior, but everything that touches your perimeter properties, those all conform to the zone minus those lot sizes. Setbacks, the location of your house in relation to the location of your house on the other side of that development is would be the same.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Bratnover.
So I'm starting to feel like Simon Cowell here, but I'll go ahead and if you'll indulge me just for the record, I'm still struggling with the lot size question. And in this case, I appreciate Commissioner Gillespie and drawing out the similarities with the prior one. In this case, though, you've got another zone you can go to. So again, I'd just like to note, perhaps we need some better clarification on the PUD process, because we've got a prioritization issue here. And frankly speaking, what I'm looking for is guidance. I'm looking for something that advises when we should hold to one or the other of these requirements. Looking forward to the next item we're going to be talking about, at the risk of jumping the gun, but there are deviations there as well, but they're nowhere near as significant. So I would just like to make that known, make sure that gets into the record. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Stevens.
Hi, thanks. I just want to point out that we do have guidance, and those are located in our findings. Number 8 under approval criteria for planned unit development, 11-03-04.07 under C7. We have 5 findings we need to meet for a planned unit development. And those are always outlined in our staff report. So we do have guidance, and we have findings that we have to meet to weigh the things that we're talking about weighing tonight. So I just want to point that out. I think that staff has done a good job here. I'll be supporting the motion.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Gillespie.
Just to also discuss this question of the PUD process versus a rezone. I think both the city and the applicant have pointed out that if we did rezone this to R1C to address some of these dimensional concerns, the applicant is correct that the proposed subdivision could be scrapped, could just be lapsed. And once that R1C is in place, the applicant or a new owner could come in and put up to 22 lots, 22 homes on this. And if they followed the subdivision rules, there is no hearing, essentially. It's automatic. So upzoning to R1C from the city's point of view is a really bad answer, right? It's just a bad answer, Commissioner Bratnover, because then the only way to prevent someone from coming in and someday building a lot more homes there is with a development agreement or a rezoning agreement. But then we're basically doing the PUD process, but now it's just called a rezone or a development agreement. So either the changing the zone is a very difficult problem for the city to try and solve. The PUD process here is straightforward. It asks us to look for adverse impact. There is none, right? Nobody who is, I haven't heard any commissioner or the public point to something specific in this application that is causing an adverse impact. And that's what we're supposed to do, is look at this application. So I'm, again, strongly supporting the motion.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Gillespie. Any other comments from the commission this evening?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
I will be supporting this motion as well. I think there's a lot of differences here though, because we do have 5-foot interior dimensional standards, again, in R1C, as Commissioner Brattenover noted. The last application, frankly, was just a big jump for me to get to 3-foot interior setbacks when a 2-story building anywhere else, like in R3, requires 10-foot setbacks. So that's, I mean, to me, you're asking a lot on that one. This one here, I'm fully in support of. I think the PUD process was appropriate, and it's a good project, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Very good. And just real quick, I'll chime in. I didn't comment on the last one, but obviously I voted in favor of that application. I'm also in favor of this motion as well. And I think Commissioner Stevens and Commissioner Gillespie summed up the PUD process and why it was used in this situation. I was going to comment as well, the staff, the applicant works with staff to vet the applications as they're working through the process. In addition to that, in this case, we have staff support with a few conditions, but beyond staff, it's also presented to all the other agencies, right? ACHD, fire, all the departments within the city. And again, in all those cases, there are no negative comments. It passes all the checks with all those various agencies and departments. So I think that just adds more weight to the application, that staff and all the departments support it. And I also see no reason why we wouldn't support it as well. So I'm in favor of the motion as well. So with that, we have a motion to approve PUD 20 and recommend approval for SUB 20-16. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schaefer,
Yes.
Blanchard,
Yes.
Moore,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock,
Aye.
Brattenover.
Nay.
6 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think I'd like to propose we take a 5-minute break before we move on to our last item this evening. So let's all return at 7:35.
Okay, Schaefer, let's get this ball rolling. Okay. So personally, I think when there's no testimony, there's no rebuttal. Yeah. Personally, we've always been that.
Okay.
So you can do as you wish, but
Well, I mean, I kind of,
it doesn't.
Ben's kind of rebutted throughout.
Yeah,
honestly,
that's
I
the
mean-
problem is we gotta.
Well, it'll probably be a moot issue here because we'll probably get some testimony, right?
Yeah.
I see a lot of dark screens. We might wait one more minute. They're getting every last second of that 5-minute break. Okay. I think we are all back. So we'll get started on our last item this evening, which is item number 5, PUD 2021 and SUB 20-19, located at 4800 West Hill Road. And with us is Mr. Leon Letson.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. All right. Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. The items before you are an 8-unit PUD for single-family homes and a preliminary plat for 8 buildable lots and 3 common lots located at 4800 West Hill Road in an R1C zone. The subject property is a 1.26 acre parcel located at the northwest corner of Hill Road and Collister Drive. The surrounding area is developed with single-family homes on various size lots. You can see many detached single-family homes to the west and north, as well as the south. Directly across the street, detached single-family. Up here on Wild Ride Drive, we have several townhomes. In close proximity are the Polecat Gulch Reserve up Collister Drive and Castle Park, which is down Hill Road. Cynthia Mann Elementary is also located in close proximity to the subject property. In addition, transit and bike lanes are adjacent to the subject property. Due to a request for reduced lot sizes, widths, and setbacks internal to the development, a PUD is required. Per the standards for developments of this size, 2 amenities have been provided in the form of more than 15% landscaped open space and the use of energy efficient design and drought tolerant landscaping. All required parking has been provided on site, and the density is well under what is allowed in the R1C zone. Particularly, this site is on an arterial adjacent to transit, so would be technically eligible for a transit bonus if the multifamily living uses were applied, which would give 12 units per acre or 15 units on this site. Included in the request is a preliminary plat for 8 buildable lots and 3 common lots. As the project is located adjacent to arterial and collector roadways, a 30-foot and 20-foot landscape buffer have been provided along Hill Road and Collister Drive respectively, highlighted here. To preserve existing mature landscaping on Hill Road, the planning team has recommended the installation of a 7-foot attached sidewalk versus a 5-foot detached sidewalk as proposed on Collister Drive. ACHD and the applicant have agreed to this design, and that mature landscaping is highlighted here in these pictures to the right of the screen. All reviewing agencies and departments have approved the project with standard conditions. No comments were received from the public prior to the hearing. In conclusion, the planning team recommends the commission approve the PUD and recommend approval of the subdivision with the attached conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. We will now hear from the applicant.
Sorry about that. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Ben Semple, 1014 South LaPointe Street, Suite 3, Boise, 83706. Thank you, Leon, for that overview of the project. As Leon stated, this project is for a PUD. I'm going to share my screen. Is a PUD for 8 lots on just over an acre. We are dedicating additional right-of-way along Hill Road. There's a 25-foot existing right-of-way. We're dedicating an additional 12 feet of right-of-way. And then the 30-foot landscape buffer exists outside of that additional right-of-way dedication. So we're essentially 42 feet from the existing right-of-way. The landscape buffer along Hill Road also allows us to retain a number of existing mature trees that are on the site. That was a big deal for the developer as well as the neighborhood. That was one of the discussion points during the neighborhood meeting. One of the things that this plan does not show, we did have some conversations with ACHD about their conditions of approval for the improvements on Hill Road. We are in agreement with attaching the sidewalk on Collister, but we will be doing a detached sidewalk that falls approximately where it shows here. It's 26.5 feet from the center line. So Hill Road, per ACHD's direction, they are recommending basically maintaining the existing roadway pavement width and bike lane and shoulder, and then having a sidewalk that ends up being, I think it's about 9 feet away from the existing edge of pavement. So there'll be a detached sidewalk along Hill Road, which I think will give a little bit more comfort for pedestrians. Not that there's sidewalk to the west of here or to the north on Collister. Hopefully that does get installed at some point in time when ACHD does additional right-of-way improvements. The average lot size on this is 3,985 square feet, so about 1,000 square feet under R1C. Some of them are smaller. The smallest lot would be lot 9, that's 3130. But we feel with the substantial landscape buffer along Hill Road, as well as the landscape buffer along Collister, the impact of these homes will be minimal. There are some larger lots in this area, but the development pattern in here, again, everything is zoned R1C. A lot of the lots are 2 to 3 times larger, but are still zoned R1C. So I could see a lot of these. There's actually some just to the west that have redeveloped. This one in particular at 4912 West Hill Road was a single family residential up front, and they went through a PUD process to establish 3 lots for density that are serviced by a common drive off of Hill Road. I think is kind of alluded to by Commissioner Gillespie earlier. This area of town could have probably been planned a little bit better by the county with connectivity of roadways. I'd foresee a lot of these homes are older, including the one that is on this site. I'm sure you've seen it if you've driven anywhere in this intersection. One of the things we also had a discussion with staff was regarding the demolition of the home. We did discuss whether we'd be able to move it. That was actually an initial discussion point with the developer. But upon review of the structure, it's just impossible to save that home, to move it anywhere, keep it on the site, or get it off site. But we are committed to trying to recycle as much of the demolished material as possible, trying to help achieve some sustainability goals. And it's one of the things that Boise is looking to do. But this, again, it's providing for 8 single-family detached homes, anywhere from 2-story, kind of modified 2-story. There's some step backs in that, probably not real apparent on those preliminary elevations of the homes. Everyone will have 2-car garage, again, with a minimum 20-foot deep driveway off of the private lane, which is private streets, again, 28 feet back to back, 5-foot sidewalks all the way around to provide connectivity from the future residents. So that would technically allow for on-street parking, although it'd be difficult because these have driveways coming off here. Maybe between the driveways, they could park on the street. But everyone will have at least 2 spots in a driveway for guests, and then their 2-car garages. We are maintaining all R1C external setbacks. The reductions in setbacks will only occur internally, and then against the landscape buffers, again, because those are substantial landscape buffers with a lot of trees in them. We feel that this is very appropriate for the area. And then part of the reason we did pursue the PUD on this was because of those landscape buffers and dedication of additional right-of-way made it difficult to achieve density that's allowable in R1C that we do feel is appropriate for this area. Again, these are building envelopes shown. Those are just the setbacks. That's not the footprint of these homes on here. I wasn't able to get those in time to put them on this drawing, but they are represented in the other application materials. And the discussion points during the neighborhood meeting were really tree removal, what was happening with the house. We did talk about, or the existing home, we did talk about the density of this, but really most of the people I talked to did not, sorry, my office phone is ringing, did not have any problems with the density, at least the people that we talked to that attended the neighborhood meeting, as well as I did receive a few phone calls from other neighbors that weren't able to attend the neighborhood meeting. And I didn't receive any strong opposition from those phone calls at all. Really just more of a curiosity, finding out what was happening. And most of them realized that it was going to be redeveloping at some point in time. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Chair, I would like to clarify a few things, not from Ben's testimony, but from a late correspondence memo that the commission received, that there was a project description that didn't reflect what this project actually is. So sorry for the confusion, but there was the recommendation that the developer, as Ben mentioned, seek ways to recycle as many of the materials from the original home as possible. And then I guess regarding the sidewalk on Hill Road, if it's indeed going to be detached, we should probably look at one of the conditions, recommended conditions of approval as a commission to possibly remove that and just make the project subject to ACHD requirements. We had specifically made a point of saying a 7-foot attached. And if that's not feasible at this point, I just want us to clear that up on the record.
Okay, thank you, Leon. Okay. With that, we'll move on to the neighborhood association. Is there a representative from the neighborhood association present? I see a hand up. Ann Gresh.
I'm not from the neighborhood association.
Okay, then we'll hang on 1 second, if you would, please. So it looks like I see no other hands up at the moment, so I'm going to assume that there's no official representative from the Neighborhood Association in attendance this evening. So with that, we will move on to questions from the commission. And for those of you in attendance that do want to testify, we'll move on to public testimony right after we do questions for the commission. Okay. So fellow commissioners, any questions for staff or the applicant?
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Commissioner Gillespie.
So I don't have a pen, so Commissioner Schaefer, can you write down or get the detailed language regarding that sidewalk? I didn't quite catch all that. I'm sorry. Could you sort of repeat exactly what condition we need to change and how we need to change it?
Yes, Chair, Commissioner Gillespie. So in the interest, which seem to be aligned with what the neighborhood wants, preserving those trees, particularly along Hill Road, which there are several mature trees. Collister does have some mature landscaping as well, but it's largely shrubs and not so much the trees that we're trying to focus on. Staff had said a 7-foot attached sidewalk would be appropriate on Hill Road if we could save those trees versus our typical default mode of 5-foot detached, 8-foot landscape buffer. During Ben's testimony, it sounds like there's been, and I'll certainly defer to the applicant to clarify for you, but it sounds like there was some back and forth with ACHD about where that sidewalk should be located, how big it should be. So all I'm asking the commission to do is to remove that specific condition. It's
I believe it's commission. I believe it's item. Excuse me, Leon. Sorry, I believe it's item 2A.
2A. Thank you.
Yes.
And then Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
And then Leon, sort of, it's automatic in the language of the existing staff report to default to the ACHD's conditions, right? So we don't need to
That's correct.
add anything on that. Thank you.
Okay, a little housekeeping taken care of there. Any other questions from the commission for either staff or the applicant?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
So that we can better understand what we think and maybe ask some questions related to it. Leon, could you summarize what the public comment or any of the public objections that you know of are?
Chair, Commissioner Gillespie, up until tonight, I had not heard from a member of the community on this. I know that we do have some people here that would like to speak on the project, but I have not heard of anything.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? We've got all of our questions out of our system this evening, it looks like. So with that, we will go ahead and move into the public testimony portion of the hearing. We have, I believe, one individual here in person that would like to testify. And then before you do, sir, I have a question for staff. Yeah, I'll let him go first. I do have a list of names here that was provided on our agenda for the evening. Should we just kind of hit those in order after we have?
Mr. Chair, we should do in-person testimony first and then do the sign-up sheet.
Okay.
And then we'll leave whichever folks have virtually raised their hands to last.
Very good. We will do that. Sir, please join us here up at the dais. Yes. If you would, please state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is George Pence, P-E-N-C-E. And my address is 4820 West Hill Road. It's the property just west of this development. I've had a phone call, I believe it was with Mr. Semple, and I apologize, Leon, for not getting in touch with you. I probably didn't know who you were or needed to know I needed to call you, right? But Mr. Semple was fine. And I was one of those that had questions out of curiosity more than anything. It's very much aware that I've lived in this area for 35 years, and I've lived in this home for 20 years. So naturally, each of you would have the same concerns that I do, I would think, when you see things going on. And I knew this was going on because I knew the previous homeowner that sold the property, and I had communication with her. I also know from past years living in this area that development is going to happen, and I know what these lots are going on, and I'm not blind to see what's happened down on West Hill Road. And I knew it was eventually going to happen. It's unfortunate to some degree, but on the other hand, I'm not totally dismayed. I guess that my concerns are this. is the density. And again, I know you go through a process and it's very clear you go through a zoning process. And it's been fun to hear that discussion tonight. And I noticed here's my question, I guess, for Leon or for Ben. 8 set lots are set now to be developed in that 1.26 acres. And it looks to me like there's 2 that's going to border up against me on the west side of the property. Is that correct? My concern is I built a fence there last year and and I know how I have a good idea if these developers are going to follow the same housing that's in there already that are being developed on West Hill Road of a privacy issue naturally, or landscaping or new fence. And I think Ben said that could be addressed possibly. And I guess that's as a homeowner and as a citizen, I'm certainly not one to live in an isolated world, even with COVID-19. But with that being said, I'm certainly concerned about those lots boarding up exactly against my property, which that'll be the only property. I guess there'll be 3 homes on the north side will be bordered up. But certainly I've lived on Collister too, so up on Collister, so I know there'll be no real homes on Collister Drive. So I'm concerned about that. I guess that's a concern, as I voice my opinion. I know this other person from Arizona, she called me the other day about, she had that home built, and I'm sure you'll hear from her in a minute about the demolition. Leon, my question for you is the demolition of the swimming pool and the time frame of that. There's a huge pool in that home.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm concerned about that. I'd like to hear more about the discussion of the sidewalk, if that's going to affect my property as it moves on, if ACHD or whatever, I think that'll not only affect me, but maybe on down a couple more houses down. I'd be concerned about ACHD working with the commission on that. I've talked to Ben's, he's convinced me in a nice professional way about the landscaping needs, and I'm very comfortable with that.
Time.
Okay.
And my time's up.
Thank you, Mr. Pence.
3 minutes. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, commissioner.
Thank you. Okay, I believe since Mr. Pence is the only one in the audience live and in person this evening, that we'll be done with in-person testimony. We'll move on to online testimony. We have a few folks that previously signed up. I'm seeing a little bit of overlap with the lists and who we have online. I'll start at the top of our list here, though, with Elizabeth McEvely. Is there Elizabeth McEvely online this evening? Okay. All right. The record shows she was not in attendance. The next person I have on our list is Jennifer Everhart. If you're online, Jennifer, please raise your hand on Zoom.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Just while we're waiting for Jennifer, perhaps, I was wondering, Saline, do you want to read the phone-in instructions in case, just read them real quick for everybody who might be following along, just in case their Zoom connection became unstable? And don't we have a dial-in they can use? Why don't we just get that out there on the record real quick?
Thank you for that, Commissioner Gillespie. While Saline does that, I see the next person on our list is Alicia Blazer, and I see Alicia has her hand up.
Yes, so the dial-in information is 888-475-4499. And the webinar ID is 980-3510-7858. And that's also in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Saline. All right, Alicia, I believe Celine's going to give you capability to speak. Good. Alicia, if you can, the floor is yours. But we cannot hear you currently.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah, we got you. You
All right,
could,
great.
name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Alicia Blazer. I am currently living at 11434 Calvert Street, North Hollywood, California, 91606. I do have a family residence in Grand Jean, Idaho. I have also spoken to the neighbors behind this residence who have spoken on the fact that they would not like to have this property be demolished on the grounds that most of the property around there, as opposed to those 3 units that we saw before, are on about a half or more acres, and dividing this 1.5 acre plot into 8 lands will significantly impact the property values around Hill Road and Hillside Avenue. You guys already have talked about the increased traffic in that area, and we can even see in the pictures the little bike path right in front of the street, and having 8 homes will drastically increase the traffic there, causing a safety issue to residents, pedestrians, and bicyclists. And on your guys's straight website, it does say that Boise City does honor safety values and character. I do also want to make it known that this house has been a landmark in Boise since 1965 when it was first built and occupied, as well as the owner built 2 houses on Hillside Road and 2 houses on Shirley Street. And that is all I have to say on that behalf.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next name I have on our list is Jennifer Lee Blazer. I've got 2 hands up. All right, I see hands up for Veronica Wallace and hands up for Ann Gresh. If either of you are, you can both hold on just for one moment and we'll see if we can get Jennifer Lee Blazer.
Mr. Chairman, I think Veronica was speaking.
Oh, is that?
Yes.
Jennifer Lee Blazer.
Yes.
That?
Can you guys hear me?
We can. If you could please state your name and address for them.
Perfect. Veronica Wallace, VERONICA Address is 3649 East Santa Clara Drive, Santan Valley, Arizona, 85140. So like we talked about before, I am here for Jennifer Blazer. Due to a medical condition, she is unable to attend. She is a pre-existing occupant of that home. And so she has more of an intimate relationship, and I will read her statement as well. I am writing to request the application to subdivide a lot of 4800 Hill Road to be rejected. According to the City of Boise website, Boise understands, as Alicia had said before, the value and character. For all these reasons, I believe this application should be declined. The new development of 8 homes where one currently stands is not safe for neighborhood residents. An additional road off Collister will increase traffic at this corner, which will impact residents of both streets. There is already heavy traffic on the corner of Collister and Hill Road, and this will cause safety issues for residents, pedestrians, and bicyclists. This proposal will decrease the property value of the neighborhood. Most of the homes in the area are currently on a half an acre or more. Subdividing 1.24 acres into an 8 plot will significantly impact their current home values on Hill Road and Hillside Avenue. This proposal also does not uphold the character of the neighborhood. Many areas of Boise are losing historical value and preservation. The house has been a landmark, like she had said before, since 1965, when it was first built and occupied. The house was built by actually the grandfather of Jennifer Blazer. When it was built, there was nothing in that area that initiated the construction of other residential houses in the area. The original homeowners, Ed and Bernice Blazer, were longtime Boise residents. Bernice Blazer was born in 1912 to Edward Day, who was a Boise realtor in 1915. Her husband, Ed Blazer, built not only the house on 4800 Hill Road, but he also built other homes in the Boise area, like she had talked about, 2 houses on Hillside Ave and 2 houses on Shirley Street. For these reasons, I respectfully ask that you not approve the request to subdivide the property on Hill Road. Thank you, Jennifer Blazer. That is it.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Wallace.
Mhm.
Moving on to the last name I have on our pre-sign up list is Octavia Gibson. I do not see an Octavia Gibson on our attendees list online. If you are in attendance, please raise your hand. Okay, let the record show that I did not see her attending. So with that, we'll move on. We have a few other folks that are online on Zoom. We'll start with Ann Gresh, who has been very patiently waiting. And if you could please state your name and address for the record.
Okay, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is all very new for me, sorry. Okay, my name is Ann Blazer Gretsch. My address is 1522 East Treasure Cove Drive, Gilbert, Arizona, 85234. As I think one of my granddaughters mentioned, I was an original resident of the home at 4800 Hill Road. My dad was the general contractor for, just going back to an earlier question about the pool, he built not only the house, but the pool as well. And my concern is, I lived on Shirley Street a number of years ago, probably 35 or 40 years ago now, when a student was walking home from school, and because Hill Road was so busy, she was struck and killed by a vehicle going down Hill Road. So I am really concerned that these 8 properties will not only impact the other residents around it by decreasing their property value because these lots are so much smaller. I am really concerned about the safety of children that are walking both to Hillside Junior High and to the elementary school that is down Hill Road. And I've been a teacher for 27 years. So the safety of children is paramount in my mind. And I think all these things need to be considered. There are no other lots in this general vicinity that are this small. I think this is totally inappropriate for that area. The Collister and Hill Road area has been a long time beautiful, I want to say serene, but peaceful area. A lot of the residents down on Collister have lived there for 30 or 40 years, and I just don't see any benefit to that 1.26 acres being subdivided into 8 lots plus a roadway. And even if there is a lot of trees, which do exist already on the property, to act as a buffer, I just don't think it's a positive impact for the city of Boise as a whole. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay. I see no other hands up at the moment, but we do have several other folks online. Those of you that wishing to testify, please raise your hands. I see a few going up now. And then we'll just start at the top of the list and work our way down. So we'll start with Spencer Andelson. Spencer, if you could unmute and please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Spencer Andelson. I am at 2780 Wildwood Street, at Boise, Idaho 83713. I just have main concerns about the road adjacent to the property and how busy it can be, and how the development of multiple houses on that property and the driveway leading up to it could make it less safe for people in the area. That's basically all I wanted to say, and just add another voice of concern to that issue.
Okay, thank you very much. We had another hand up, at least one other hand up, but now that hand has been turned off. If there's anyone else wishing to speak on the record, please raise your hand. There's Wally. Okay, Wally, if you could please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Walter Hartje. You can call me Wally. 1602 North 20th Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702. I'm actually the developer, and I just wanted to comment on the condition of the home and the pool. It's a beautiful home, you know, when you're driving past on Hill and Collister. Unfortunately, has not have been very well maintained. It's actually a rental and has been a rental for some time. So both the pool and the home are in pretty rough shape as far as, all of the items. So I just kind of wanted to add that as far as, people, commenting on how beautiful it is and how much it means to them and everything. It's very different now, I think, than probably when it was built, and how it's been treated, prior to when we received it or bought it. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. The next on the list is Esther Saya. I apologize if I mispronounced that. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay. My name is Esther Seha. I reside at 3901 North Cambria Way. I live in the Collister neighborhood and have for 16 years. I'm an avid runner and biker in this neighborhood and adjacent neighborhoods. And I can tell you firsthand that with all of the development that is occurring, not just within the confines of the Collister neighborhood boundaries, but also in adjacent neighborhoods, like just west of Pierce Park, traffic has been an obvious sign of growth. And I would ask that as you review and decide whether or not you're going to approve this development, that you take into consideration the location, the main street in which people will be exiting. I can tell you, if you spend any evening or morning or midday riding your bike, walking, or driving up to the North Collister trailhead, you are going to run into very fast downhill bicyclists, just screaming down to the stop sign heading south on Collister, North Collister, to the stop sign on the intersection of Collister and Hill Road. So, development is going to happen, but please take into consideration the fact that I have seen personally in the last 10 years, a huge uptick in just families and bicyclists and runners and walkers in the neighborhood, and more so really as of this last March. So please take into consideration pedestrian and bicyclists who heavily use North Collister, and this development is right down, it's right next to the main roadway that people use. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we've heard from almost everyone that's online. If there's anyone that has not yet testified and you're online, please raise your hand and we will call on you. Okay. All right. I see no more hands up. So with that, we will go ahead and close the public testimony. Now we have to do rebuttal. That's right. So Mr. Semple, it's your opportunity to rebut, and you have some comments to rebut, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'd like to take the opportunity to address some of those concerns. I'm going to echo what Wally added, the developer. The home is very beautiful. I actually used to live right down by Cynthia Mann Elementary. So I drive by here almost every day, rode my bike, rode the bus a lot. So I got on that bus at the corner there. Unfortunately, it does have some condition issues based on how it's been lived in, that require it. I mean, initially the thought was to try to save it and move it. After they did some evaluations on the structure, it just is not feasible at all. Unfortunately, I have talked to them about, trying to salvage some stuff out of there if we can, to save some of the more unique fixtures or, some of the characteristics of it. Going to safety, I think one of the benefits of this project is that we are adding sidewalk where there is no sidewalk right now on Hill Road or Collister. There's sidewalk on the east side of Collister, but no sidewalk on the west side. And so I think that I know that this will improve pedestrian safety. It will allow residents of this development, their children, to walk from their private road on a sidewalk to a sidewalk on Collister, come to the intersection, cross at the intersection at a crosswalk at the stop, the four-way stop, and then walk on sidewalk all the way down Hill Road if they're going to Cynthia Mann Elementary. So it will provide for a pedestrian connection that way. Obviously, east on Hill Road is a different story. It's kind of a walk to get to Hillside Junior High from here. I think they're still bused from this location to the school down there at 36th Street and Hill Road. See, there is, just real quickly on density, the lots that have recently been platted to the east of Collister are zoned R2, which would allow for a much higher density, as well as the townhomes that are up on the hill there are all zoned R2 as well. Yes, they are attached townhomes, but they are for sale townhomes, which their lot sizes are at this size, if not a little bit smaller, with very limited yard space. These are true single family homes. I think that the addition of the architecture will be complementary to the area. It'll be a little bit more modern than what is built out there, but with all of the property around here being zoned R1C, there's a very real possibility for additional development, extended development in this area. And so I don't think that density, I think that there's going to can be more density in this area than what is right now. And as Leon stated during his staff presentation, because this is on a major arterial and transit route, we could apply for and it would be allowed to request a density bonus because we're on that transit line, and we are not doing that. We felt 8 fit the property. It'll provide a nice home, single family home. I think that it's going to increase property value. I think that there's a little bit of a misconception that new construction lowers property value. Knowing the developer and the builder that he has used in the past, these are very high quality homes. Again, they all have garages. These are not quick shotgun homes. The developer is a resident of Boise. And so I know he's committed to providing for a quality project here. To address the neighbor to the west, the sidewalks will stop at the property line to the west, so there won't be any impact on his property. And if ACHD does come through to extend that in the future, obviously that would be a conversation that ACHD would have with him if there was additional right-of-way or any impact on his property. The fencing will definitely work with him on the type of fencing. If he just installed a new fence that he wants to keep, that provides him with the privacy he wants, obviously we would leave it and not take that down. But there will be new fencing around the perimeter of this to provide privacy for existing and future residents. So we can definitely work in conjunction with him to hopefully put to rest any concerns about privacy. There will be one home, the one that's up more towards the front along that western property line, that will be essentially right adjacent to his home with the correct R1C setback from that side property line. But the other home that is along the western property line does fall kind of adjacent to his backyard. And there are some larger mature trees in that back corner that I think they fall on his property, but we can look at the condition and the species of those and make sure that they're healthy and a good species to have there. And so that will help maintain existing privacy also. I think that we touched on the pool and the home and property value. So I think that this is going to be a very good addition to this. And I do understand some of the concerns of the neighborhood, but we're doing what we can to address the privacy and the safety. And then ACHD did issue a staff report that they evaluated traffic from these 8 single-family homes and determined that they met the thresholds of their evaluation and that it would not put any undue burden on the transportation sector or the transportation roadways around here. And with additional right-of-way being dedicated, it probably improves that and allows for the future expansion of Hill Road when they do end up widening that. And with that, I would stand for more questions.
Okay, thank you, Ben. All right, I think with that, we will bring this back before the commission. What is the commission's pleasure?
I've been in motion all night, Mr. Chairman, so I'm going to defer to my online colleagues.
So noted. All right, online colleagues. I think I need the Jeopardy theme song in the background.
Chris wants to talk.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Do we need to wait for a motion before there's discussion here? What's that?
I think it's acceptable to, in this case, we can probably have a little discussion.
Okay, well, while I'm on then, question for staff. Leon, on the Hill Road side.
Commissioner Blanchard, I'm sorry, we can't ask staff any more questions because the public testimony portion is complete.
Oh, okay, well, there we go. All right, well then, all right. So I guess this is the same thing that perplexed me about the first application that Mr. Simple put in. So we have a 30-foot landscape buffer on the Hill Road side. And if we just simply reduce that to 20 feet, it seems then we wouldn't have any setback issue. And then again, we're being asked to look at 3-foot interior setbacks. And I guess, you know, my question is, why are we going through the PUD process rather than just designing a 26-foot structure? It's just kind of confusing to me that we would, you know, the developer would be like, well, all I can do is this 30-foot building. I can't do a 26-foot wide building and actually make it fit within the dimensional requirements. I just, again, I'm perplexed at why we're being asked to do this when it looks like we could just simply avoid all of this by just proposing structures that fit within the dimensional requirements. I just don't, again, why even bother with dimensional requirements if we're just going to PUD all of them away? That's kind of been the question all night. So I guess that's my comment. I'm just having a real hard time again justifying this when if I were sitting at the front counter, the first thing I would have said was, well, design a 26-foot building and then bring it back instead of a 30-foot wide building. It just doesn't. And then get 10 more feet on the other side and make your building longer to get your square footage. I just don't know why it's like, well, this is the only thing we can make work. And it can be, most of this can be designed away and not even, and be built by right. I guess that's it.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
I'll go ahead and make a motion, then we can debate it. I move we approve PUD 20-21 and recommend approval of SUB 20-19 with all the terms and conditions of the staff report.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Gillespie.
Yeah, I think so just first of all, with respect to the setbacks, so I think Commissioner Blanchard is correct that the interior setbacks, the setbacks between the buildings are set at 3 feet. And that's to meet the building code requirement that there's 6 feet between the buildings. I think the idea here is that those landscape buffers on Hill Road and Collister provide a very important public benefit. There's a dedication of right-of-way on Hill Road. And as we all know, Hill Road is like a major cycle track. And the same as, it looks like they're really going to help that bottom portion of Collister where it runs down the hill in terms of, putting in sidewalks. I assume there'll be a nice bike lane there and then trees. Looking at the site design, the only way to add space between the buildings is to reduce that landscape buffer on Collister, because that's the, if you will, the horizontal dimension of all the 8 buildings. And I assume the city prefers to have that big landscape buffer and those, that 6 foot wide space between the building, as I assume that's the trade that the city wants to make. All the perimeter setbacks are per the code. So it's really those skinny building setbacks that are at issue here. And the trade-off is that big landscape buffer on Collister. That's probably a trade-off I would make. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Is that Commissioner Stevens?
That was me. I would agree with everything that Commissioner Gillespie just said, and I'd add a couple of other things and throw it back to Commissioner Blanchard because I'm interested in hearing his thoughts. But when I look at the approval criteria, right, and I'm not sure with regard to Commissioner Blanchard and the other sort of philosophical conversations we've been having tonight about this, if there is fundamentally an issue with 3 foot setbacks, and if so, maybe we do need to have a conversation offline about that, but they are permitted by building code. And I look through the approval criteria that we have in front of us. And I just don't have, I'm not seeing where this particular application doesn't meet these. And so when I hear Commissioner Blanchard ask about those setbacks, I'm just, I always go back to the approval criteria to look at what we're talking about. And, maybe the setbacks are related to the first criteria, which is compatibility to other uses in the general neighborhood. But then we've got, 4 other criteria, and I just am not seeing how this doesn't meet those. And so I think we're seeing improvement in safety with sidewalks. This is an area that we've talked a lot about safe routes to school for, and we're seeing, sidewalks being put in so that we can start making those connections that need to be made, because this is an urban neighborhood and it's, densely populated by families. So I guess I'm obviously supporting the motion, and I just am curious if there's just sort of a philosophical problem with 3 foot setbacks, and if so, how do we contend with that? And I'm not sure that this application is where we're going to do that unless there's some way that the application isn't meeting the standards that we're required to look at for this application. So I'll be supportive.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Any other comments?
I just want to, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
I just want to clarify in the motion, are we including the condition to strike the item to, what is it, 2.1 from the staff report?
Yikes.
Commissioner Gillespie.
Commissioner Moore, you caught me. Commissioner Stevens, with your leave, I would amend the motion to include striking condition 2A.
I concur.
Thank you, Commissioner Moore.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Bratnober?
So in this case, I believe that the section of the code regarding PUDs, which states the minimum lot size of the zoning district may be reduced within the density limits of the district, can be properly applied here. The guidance in the code is very open and non-specific, but this deviation is more reasonable than those that we've seen earlier tonight. I'm supporting the motion, and I'm trying to reconcile in my own mind where the cutoff line is based, and maybe it goes to Commissioner Stevens' suggestion that we get together and have a discussion about what this latitude means to us as a commission. Is it infinite? Are there points where the pain level, where we should respect that? How are we going to go through that? Because we've had some great discussion tonight about this issue. And I'd like to see us, while I know I said I'm looking for guidance and basically heard that, well, you know, the guidance is in there, maybe I need a little more, or maybe I'd like to understand where I should see that threshold, and in anticipation of when we deal with neighborhoods who feel that that threshold has somehow been violated. So again, I'm in support of the motion. Sorry for the long-winded explanation, but I wanted to make sure that came across. Thanks.
That's fine. Thank you, Commissioner Bratnober. Any other discussion? Okay. Just real quick, I'm also in support of the motion. And I think getting back to Commissioner Blanchard's original question about why that 30-foot setback is where it is on Hill Road, I suspect it has something to do with location of several of those large trees that are existing. I think in order to preserve that buffer, which is a benefit to the community, that's why they placed that wider buffer there, just to maximize those existing trees. So, and in addition, you know, I think in general that the density works, and the connectivity is fine. And I personally don't have any strong opinion regarding the internal setbacks being the 3-foot. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the vote. If the clerk can please call the roll.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Blanchard,
No.
Moore,
Aye.
Stevens,
Aye.
Gillespie,
Aye.
Finfrock.
Aye.
I'm sorry, was that a yes or a no?
Aye. Yes.
Thank you. Bratnober?
Aye.
6 opposed, 6 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. That will conclude our meeting.
Thanks,
Meeting is
all.
adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Good night.